Welcome everyone to the March 2015 GNU Radio Developer Call. So I'm just going to quickly call out the agenda points for today's call. We're going to talk about Summer of Code, the Hackfest. There'll be some news on what's happening with Cgran. Tom will be talking about Android. Actually, maybe Morris, you want to talk about Android? Is there anything you want to add to that?
Not yet, no.
Okay. And Control Port, so there's lots of new stuff happening. There will be a release soon after the Hackfest. There was already a news item posted on that, but Tom will be talking about that as well. And we usually talk about the working groups, but not today because there hasn't been any significant progress, and I'm pretty confident that that will change next month. Okay, so is there someone who could help me take notes, because Crofton's bot isn't running, and as long as I'm talking, I'm not really good at taking notes. I can take over, or maybe someone just. Yeah, thanks a lot.
I'll just post them up afterwards.
Okay, thanks a lot. So Summer of Code. So I don't know if I actually posted this or if there was just a lack of announcement, but we're not participating in GSOC this year. So we did apply. We got rejected. We've been analyzing what went wrong, and we have some good ideas, and we definitely will be applying next year again. But we also applied to Summer of Code in Space, which is organized by the European Space Agency, and we got accepted into that program, which is I think it's really exciting because it's I think the program is still a bit different. Like the whole feel of it is a bit more. I don't know. It's just different, and also. I thought we are a space relevant project, so I think it's a good spot for us to be in. And I already had one student contact me that he'll be putting out an application soon. We only have one spot this year, so there won't be a whole bunch of students talking about this stuff at the conference. That'll be different, but it'll also be a lot more competitive concerning the actual application. And the application process is very similar to GSOC, and it mainly matters that you have a good plan, what you want to work on over the summer. And as I said, we already have one student who has contacted me off list that he'll be putting out his application very soon. I'm not going to go into details because he didn't go public either, or maybe she. No. Yes, so Summer of Code in Space is happening. GSOC is not, but we have not lost interest in GSOC. We'll be applying next year. And unless there's any questions, that's pretty much all that I have to say at this point. The coding period for Summer of Code in Space, or SOCIS, is pretty much identical to the GSOC one. Any questions? No? Okay. So that's it for GSOC, and next item on the list is the Hackfest, which will be at Edis HQ at the end of this month. So Tom, tell us about the Hackfest.
Yeah, it's happening the week after next. It's going to be a big one this time, which is great because at least Edis has the facilities to support us, which is just fantastic. So I've got the link on our page here on the outline here. It's under our normal Hackfest page as well, so you can get there. What's in here right now is basically a list of topics that we want to address. And you can see that there's stuff that I'm interested in specifically, but then there's a handful of other things that that people have participated in the past or have been interested in kind of the coming days. This one, I'm going to try to be a little bit more regimented with what we do at this Hackfest, more so than what we've done in the past. Like, I know everybody has their pet projects to come and work on, and that's great, but we have some significant issues that I'd like to address. So I'm going to try my best to kind of get everybody working on patching up a few specific things in the first couple of days, and then maybe in the last couple of last few days to try to work on a few new things that we can we can complete and accomplish. But Monday morning we'll go over essentially the plan And if I'm overruled on this and everybody just comes and wants to work on their own thing, that's what these hackfests are for. So this might not work out, but it's something that I'm thinking about to try to handle a few of the kind of the bigger issues. Bigger issues include like Moritz has been finding this this problem that he's been running into with GRMAC and the PMTs on the embedded systems. Tracking that down, if we can get that done really quickly, that'd be awesome. The PyQWT, if we can figure out a plan for how to fix this PyQWT issue that we keep running into when people are having problems with, stuff like that, I'd really love to get smashed, as quickly as possible. And then we have a lot of other stuff coming up that, like and we'll talk about this in a second, but like the new CGRAN website, we're working on a new front page for GNURadio.org itself. If we can take this time with a lot of the developers who have been working on the project for a long time and have a vested interest in it and an eye for what's going on with the community, with the project, with the whole thing, I think it'd be great since we're all there together to sit down and maybe walk through these new kind of UI experiences that we're kind of focusing on to try to solidify those so that we can all be together and make decisions on this is good, this is bad, this is where we want to go. So that's kind of my thinking for this Hackfest, which is a little bit different. But also, like I said, it's over 20 people that are coming to this, which is kind of amazing that it's like, well, it's a little over a third of the original GNU Radio conference itself. So, definitely lots of developers, which means that we should be able to actually get to a lot of projects and have a really good discussion that week. So that's where we want to go with the Hackfest. So, the agenda item was called Hackfest Prep. So if you are coming to the Hackfest and there are specific items that you're interested in, put them on the page, and then we'll try to we'll have a little get together on Monday to decide what we want to try to accomplish that week. Like I said, there's tons of old stuff and tons of new stuff, so we got to try to figure out how to balance our success at this Hackfest. I think that's what I wanted to basically put out there as far as where we're going and kind of the structure of this thing. This is a little bit of inside baseball type of discussion, since these Hackfests tend to be, again, the kind of the core developers or the people that are really heavily involved in this stuff. It's not like the conference, but I did want to give people a sense of where we're going with these, what their intentions are, how we think about the Hackfests. Because if you've never been to one, they're a little bit of a strange beast. Any thoughts or questions on that? No. Okay.
So I think we could just mention there's a wiki page of upcoming projects.
Yeah.
And that might be worth checking out just to see which general direction we're going. So what the high-level problems are that we're trying to solve. It also has pet projects in there, so there's no list of priorities. But it's an interesting read, and it also gives an idea of what's going to be happening in Radio Land this year. So I definitely recommend having a look at the Hackfest.
Yeah. Is that the Hackfest 1503 page, or is there another page?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to the March call, the agenda actually has a link to it, and if you go just to the Hackfest wiki page itself, we have them all listed, and it's the latest one that's on there. Yeah, just go to Hackfest March 2015 at Edis Research. Oh, and that's so. This is something that came up, before the call, as Martin and I were talking, and Martin mentioned that we're not going to be talking about the working groups prep. This is the work. The Hackfest is a good time for all of us to get together and get the energy back up and ideas going for those working groups again, because the working groups have been doing really well, and now we need to kind of re-energize them with the new problems to address and things to work on. So that's why Martin was thinking that next week or next month we should have a lot more to hear back from these guys. All right. So should we just go on to CGRAN progress?
Yeah, let's do that. Nathan, what's happening?
All right, so we have I guess, alpha of CGRAN going on. We've just getting some feedback there's some minor layout tweaks going on and some color changes, some details discussion that's not really important for this discussion. But the big change is that we have a manifest file format that we've asked some of the module authors to add to their repositories. If any of you are listening to this, then you could add that, let us know. That would be awesome. I don't know if you want to talk about the manifest files now.
Do we have a link to? If we can put a link somewhere to what we think the manifest file should hold, that might be useful. Or maybe Martin, just your pull request on the manifest file for GR Mod Tool, just to give people a place to go where they can see what's going on. Because I think. And correct me, Martin and Nathan, you've been much more invested and involved in the creation of the new CGRAND than I have. As Nathan said, the page itself, we're going through like style tweaking mostly at this point. The rest of our goals have mostly been accomplished with it. And so one of the things that I want to do during the Hackfest is with a bunch of us, as I mentioned, a bunch of us look at this thing and kind of try to solidify and kind of nail down the way that we want it to look and feel and flow. And at that point, the big remaining question is the manifest file in the correct format? Does it have the correct fields? Is it what we want in a manifest file? And so we don't lock ourselves into a way of working that's not gonna flow for the future. So I think that's kind of the big thing that we need to make sure we've done correctly is managing this manifest file. So yeah, so if people can provide feedback on that, I'm looking at guys like Sylvain and Dimitri, who are good friends of ours and heavily invested in our project as well as their own GNU Radio projects. You guys have a couple of the bigger, more well-used, kind of popular projects out there. So getting you to specifically to look at the manifest file, and anybody else that's listening who has a well-used and popular AutoTree module in CGRAND, getting your feedback is going to be key for this.
Yeah, I sent out an email to some of the AutoTree module authors that we know well. Cool. Sending them a sample manifest file. So if you could just add that, and then we can pull them. We can pull in the AutoTree modules and see how well that works with our CGRAND. That would be nice. Of course, we've been adding these manifest files by hand for testing purposes, but we want to make sure that the information that we're displaying on CGRAND is actually the information that you want to have displayed on CGRAND. So yeah, at this point, it would be really nice if people could give us some feedback, as Tom said. And as soon as we switch from alpha to beta stage, we'll be putting the page up, for public use immediately. So
yeah, and that should happen during the Hackfest.
Yeah, exactly. So very soon, like we're very close. Okay, I think that's all we have to say right now. As I said, we'll be publishing CGRAND itself very soon. And a lot of people have actually gotten sneak previews anyway, so it's not exactly a secret at this point. Let's talk about Android. Oh, Tom, you talk about Android.
Yeah, it was. I was hoping to have a bigger announcement on the mailing list, but it turned into a bit of a soft release. I've been working on porting GNU Radio to Android for a few months now. And a number of people that have been working with us have helped out on this. It works. I showed it off at FOSDEM. That was my last thing, is showing a Nexus 7 tablet running Android with a GNU Radio flow graph that took in a signal from an RTL-SDR dongle, filtered it, and displayed it to as just the time domain signal on the Android screen. There are some changes to the GNU Radio source code and stuff that I'm not fully comfortable just merging into master. Like there's a lot of pound-diff Android type things, so it should be able to build for both Android and our normal desktop OSs. But I've released it as a separate Android branch. There is on the outline, the agenda page for this call, there is a link to the Android wiki page, which has a walkthrough for how you actually get and build the dependencies and GNU Radio for Android, as well as a project that I'm calling GRAND, GNU Radio for Android. And these are things like the audio source and syncs, the any of the sensors that we want access to, so you can pull in data from your sensors and process them in GNU Radio, and then we might eventually have other kind of things that are and then there's a sync that allows you to share data between the flow graph and your Java Android UI, so that there's a way to move data between those two. So that's what's going to be in Grand. And then there's some hints, some little tips on there for kind of how to build your Android application, kind of where things fit. That's going to need a lot of work. Like a lot of this, like I said, it's an alpha release basically, so it's going to need a lot of development work and people who are familiar with GNU Radio and familiar with Android to kind of help us kind of piece all this stuff together and make it work, nice and smoothly. But I am pretty excited about this project. I think that there are plenty of people and really qualified developers that are working in Android who want to do interesting radio and signal stuff. So I'm really happy that we can start accommodating those ideas. I think once it's out there and once it's available to everybody, I think we're going to see some really clever stuff happening because they now have access to this entire toolbox that we have in GNU Radio of signal processing tools and capabilities and just all sorts of crazy stuff. And it's one of those things where people ask, well, why are we bothering with Android since we've been doing all this other development for the embedded world? And to me, Android is a great embedded OS when you have a really cool touchscreen and display. So the Nexus 7 tablet that I'm using in particular, but any of the tablets out there, there's this great ability for interfacing with the flow graph and with signals. Whereas I look at the other embedded stuff mostly for the headless work, where you don't need that kind of interaction. You just need a small, compact thing that just runs on its own. So I think these are both they're complementary depending on your use case. So let's see, what else do I want to say about Android? The reason why it was a soft release, my big intention was that I was going to have UHD working with Android for the big release. I wanted to be able to connect, my B200 or B210 to my tablet and have, transmit receive type applications. We didn't quite get there. There's some issues that I hope to work during or just before the Hackfest to try to solve that problem. So I wasn't quite at the stage where I just wanted to, broadcast this on the mailing list and out there, but I did want to get it out there. I definitely wanted to get it out there before the Embedded Linux conference, so we had something up and available. And it was kind of coincidental that I posted the information one day, and then the next day we get like a couple of people asking, one on the mailing list and one on the IRC channel, about Android use, and I was finally able to, because we've had this before, but I was finally able to point them to, yes, we can actually get you started, and we're already getting actually useful, valid feedback from those developers. So it's out there, but bear with us. Obviously, it's not perfect. There's going to be some stumbling blocks. There's going to be some problems that we're going to run into as this goes on. But this is definitely something that we're well, at least I'm committed to, and I hope the support page on the GNU Radio Wiki is enough for people to get started and start getting feedback to us.
So, as an example, and just to wrap this up, can you give an example app that you have running on Android?
So honestly, the only example, well, no, I have a few examples. One of them where I just broadcast, a tone out of the speaker or noise out of the speaker or something like that. So I just wanted to be able to test audio output, and that output actually, I will say, is a little flaky. There needs to be some kind of double buffering happening that I'm not doing, so the work function in that block needs to be handled a little bit more cleverly than I did. But so I was just, most of what I've done are very bare examples of just getting things to work. The other one is just recording audio, so that, just showing the audio system or recording sensor data. So pulling in accelerometer data and being able to process it in GNU Radio. Now, what you do with that information, I don't know yet. But I'm sure that there's tons of stuff to happen. And the final one, the one that I show off, the kind of the interesting one, is being able to plug in an SDR dongle and just show the waveform, so you can actually see the waveform scrolling across the screen. So it's kind of like an oscilloscope, right? I made it with that, kind of oscilloscope green, black background type idea. So here's the thing: we're pretty confident with the amount of developers out there, the amount of people thinking about these types of things, and the capabilities that GNU Radio brings to solving problems, that there's going to be a huge amount of actual applications. I have been so far down into the guts of working on GNU Radio and Android to get this to work that I've kind of lost sight of what I want to be able to do with it. So my hope is that I provide the basic toolkit so that everybody else who has great ideas can make them work now. I'd love to be able to get my head out of this and back up and thinking about that stuff, but that's not where I am, unfortunately, right now. But I really believe that there's going to be a ton of really cool applications that can come from this.
Can you talk about the control port thing while you have the mic?
Yes. So control port. That's the next item, agenda item. I made an announcement last August, I think it was, that we had to. We didn't remove control port. We removed the only working backend for control port from GNU Radio for various reasons. But we had to do it, basically. So we had this control port, which was this always designed as an abstracted interface to an RPC kind of backend service. So without that backend service, control port was basically a no-op. You could put control port stuff in your flow graph, it just wouldn't do anything because there was nowhere for it to go. But we've really wanted it back, again, especially with all of the work on the embedded systems, with the E300 being available, with, hopefully eventually with Android as well, for profiling, for monitoring, for remote interaction. There's just tons of stuff that we want to be able to do with this, and we've been missing it. Even though we have this tool, this control port tool, that should be available to us. So we sat down, Doug Geiger, specifically, and myself, and a few others kind of decided that Thrift looked like, the Apache Thrift project looked like the fastest way to re-implement what we had before and get us a working control port backend again. Doug made a good crack to start that, to kind of create the interface, and then kind of handed it over to me, and I've been working with Nate Gergen, who is actually the original author of Control Port, and he and I have been working on the service itself to kind of launch the server and make sure that the interface works. That is very, very close to being ready for release, or for merging basically back into master. I really wanted to do it this week. I'm debating how there's one problem left, and I'm debating if we want to just merge it in and fix that problem later, or if I want to wait. So I'm kind of just trying to see if we have a couple more good ideas to solve this. The basic problem is that if you run the code, like our QA code, like hundreds of times in a row, you could get it to lock up, and I think it's a thread race condition. As far as Nate and I can tell, though, we're doing everything we possibly can, so this actually might be a Thrift bug. And that's the other thing. Thrift right now is on version 0.9.2. It's actually used in a lot of cases. Like, there's a lot of people that are using Thrift, and there's a lot of discussion about it, but it's still a fairly young project. And I think their development model is, I think they're going to be moving fairly quickly. So, the dependency for getting control port with Thrift to work is Thrift version 0.9.2, which also means, though, that most of the distros that package this stuff aren't going to work directly out of the box, because most of them package either 0.9.0 or 0.9.1. So to use it, you'd have to build your own, compile your own. So I'm going to put instructions on that up on the control port wiki, because there's a few little gotchas for Ubuntu. Their configure script doesn't catch everything properly. So I'll try to make sure that that's documented well enough that people could compile their own Thrift and get things to work. But because of that, I'm seeing a few things that are kind of popping up that look like they're Thrift bugs. So that kind of makes me a little nervous. But they tend not to. They haven't yet impacted my actual use of control port. In my testing, letting it run forever and things like that. So I think we're starting to kind of wrangle it into shape. But what this is going to do is it's going to revive things like our control port monitor, and probably the most used perspective of control port right now has been the performance monitor tool, which is this graphical application that allows us to monitor which blocks are taking the most CPU and most time to process and buffer health and stuff like that. So we're very close to being able to get that back up and running. The other nice thing that we've done, and this is the original control port concept, was that the control port, from GNU Radio's perspective, that API was established. And it didn't matter what backend was being run, you still use the same API. So GNU Radio's use of control port doesn't change depending on what backend you're using. So we were able to put in this other backends, and now we could have eventually hopefully multiple backends that you could kind of choose from depending on your scenario. But the API actually doesn't change to how you use control port. That wasn't true for the client side. The client side mostly being written in Python, doesn't have to be, but that's where most of our clients were being constructed, was in Python. That tended to be very closely associated with whatever backend tool you were using. So if it was Thrift or if it was ICE, they were very kind of, you wrote it kind of for that. So Nate and I, mostly Nate, actually created an abstraction layer for the client side as well, so that makes the client side, you write your layer for whatever client you have, and then it becomes very similar on to get access to the control port information. So now you just do a control port, kind of a radio.get knobs, and that returns a dictionary. And it doesn't matter which control port version backend it's using, it gives you the same information and it's the same access to it. So that's kind of nice. We've kind of smoothed that out to make it easy to easier in the future to switch between these. The downside, though, is that because we were formerly using ICE, ICE comes with a lot of fantastic products to do all sorts of other stuff on the client side that are not kind of generic RPC calls. So if you've created a bunch, if you were using control port before and you've created a bunch of your stuff using ICE Grid or ICE Storm or any of their other products, that's very specific to the back end. So we haven't, there's no way that we can really solve that. But if you're not using those tools and you're really just looking at it for how do I get knobs, how do I set them, how do I toggle stuff, trigger resets, and start and stop the flow graph, those types of things, that's now an abstracted layer even in the client. So we should be able to move these things around pretty quickly. And your former code using control port, you should be able to revive relatively quickly with the new way that we're instrumenting everything. And I think that wraps up the news on control port. Like I said, I look for it soon. Basically my debate is, do I want to rush this? Am I rushing this enough to get into 3.7.7, and is that wise, or should I wait a little bit longer until after our release, and then we 3.7.8 kind of has the control port thing in there. This might be a decision that we wait until the Hackfest to talk with a bunch of people and get some other views on the subject, and what we might be getting ourselves into if we release too early. Normally I would be very conservative about this. The flip side is, if you don't want control port, it's a very easy thing not to worry about. Right, you just disable it. If you don't have Thrift installed, if you don't want to use Thrift, or if you have an older version of Thrift, it just won't install. You won't have control port. So that there's kind of no penalty for people who don't want that. The question is, for people who do, are we giving them a very problematic package to start with? So we'll debate this coming soon. So
the installation issue. I mean, we had that with ICE. It was pretty much the same thing, where like the version that was coming through the distros wasn't up to date enough. Can we pull that into PyBombs? So install Thrift through PyBombs? Will that work?
Yeah, that's actually probably a really good idea. I think I mentioned that at some point, and then I forgot about it. But yeah, that might be the thing to do, is work with, while we're at the Hackfest. That should be a very quick recipe I think we can put together. Yeah, that's probably a really good idea for that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm leaning towards the latest version that they've released, is because Well, for one thing, it has a call. When you launch a server, if you give the server a port 0, it finds its own ephemeral port for you. But now you want to know what that port is, so you do a get port. Well, that get port was only introduced in this latest version. And I think that's an important one that we want. So it's also like, well, why arbitrarily, if we're introducing this, why arbitrarily restrict ourselves to an older product? You know, this is a brand new thing, so I'm pushing on the latest version for bugs and for that type of thing. So yeah, so we will want to build it by hand, and yeah, getting into PyBombs is probably a very important one.
Cool. So the final item on the agenda is, in that case, release schedule. Tom put out a news item that you probably all read. There'll be a code. And yeah, maybe you can just go over the dates and the specifics.
Yeah, and this goes into, again, something that's going to happen because of the Hackfest. This Hackfest is really coming at, well, not a perfect time. We crafted this schedule around the fact that this Hackfest was happening. As you know, if you've been listening to these calls for the past few months or keeping up with this stuff at all, we are planning on extracting Volk as its own project, as its own separate library that Nathan is going to take control over and maintain. Now, it's going to still be a GNU Radio project. It's just not going to be in the source code. You know, it'll come with the source code of GNU Radio, but you can just check out or build your libvolk library project and distribute that as a completely separate thing. We've been working slowly to make sure all this stuff is kind of in place for us to be able to do this properly, and so we're very close to having all those things in place. And so the idea is that the first day of the Hackfest is when we're going to make the switch over in GNU Radio's repo, master repo, to pointing to removing Volk, adding it as a submodule, and then promoting the Volk repo, which actually exists already, as the way, you know, as its own thing. That's going to happen. Like I said, it's supposed to happen the first day of the Hackfest. There are a few more agenda items that we want to make sure have been checked off to make sure that that's going to be that we can do this. But that's going to happen the first day of the Hackfest. That's going to give us the rest of that week that I'm hoping everybody can work off of while we're hacking on all sorts of other issues, to give this a little bit of a stress test, to find out flaws that might exist in the way that we've done it. Maybe our documentation needs some work. Maybe there's some very common gotchas that people are going to be running into when, you know, as they update to this change. You know, while we're all together at Hackfest, this is going to give us time to explore that. So that's one of the big driving kind of focuses going into this. So we get that week to test this stuff, to get comfortable with it. We're also going to have that week for any new features that people are working on during the Hackfest, or things coming in from the pull request, from the issue tracker. Get those into place during that week, and that's kind of what Jonathan Corrigan likes to do during these Hackfests. Is he kind of works with all of us for whatever features or bug fixes we have and integrates them during the week. So that will give us a good solid base for what's going to be part of the 3.7.7 release. The Monday after the Hackfest, so April 6th, we're having our code freeze. Now, this is the second time we've done this, and I think this is going to be our new mode of operation. Is we have a week, maybe we'll extend it to 2 weeks, but right now it's just a week of a code freeze where no new features get pushed into master. You know, master is our testing ground now for the next version 3.7.7, and we just focus on bug fixes for that week. So nothing brand new, only bug fixes going that week. And then on April 13th, the following Monday, is our scheduled release for 3.7.7 and our maintenance release 3.7.6.2. So that's kind of the next couple of weeks of our plan for getting out our next release.
Okay. Well, as I said, there won't be any working group discussions today, so that wraps it up. A lot of announcements this time. Did anyone have any last-minute issues they want to bring up for this call? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so the next call will be, I just posted the event on our G+ community. Will be the third Thursday in April, which is the 16th, and it'll be so. In April, Europe has switched to daylight saving, so it'll be back to the usual time. So I think it'll be 7 o'clock in CEST, and that means it's 10 Pacific, right?
Just, I don't know anymore.
Whatever. Just put the item in G+, and then you have to figure out your own time zone.
Yeah.
Whatever is in G+, on the Plus community page is correct. Okay? And if that still doesn't make sense, just ping me on the mailing list or something. So that's it for this time. Next call will be after the Hackfest, so I'm pretty sure there'll be enough new things to announce. And yeah.
Yeah, well, if I can just interject real fast, this isn't really GNU Radio related, but since I'm the chair of the program this year, I want the GNU Radio community to be well aware that at ACM's MobiCom in Paris in September, we're going to have the SRIF, the Software Radio Implementation Forum workshop. It's happening September 7th. I'm chairing it. I know a lot of you guys in Europe. I want to make sure that we get the word out to all the researchers out there. So especially people who can't come to the GNU Radio conference, which will be announced soon, fairly soon as well. The SRIF workshop could be a really good place to meet up because we'll be in Paris, so pretty central to a lot of people around Europe. So you'll be hearing more from me on that later, though. So thanks for letting me advertise.
Okay. Okay, in that case, bye-bye, guys. See you next month.